Hey everybody, it's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. Let's do an update on the tropics. Now I just got the 5 o'clock advisory for both Tropical Storm Marco and Tropical Storm Laura. Let's go right to the satellite image. Here's where they are. You can see one is close to the Gulf of Mexico already. In fact, Marco might be in the Gulf of Mexico later tonight into early tomorrow morning. So it's a full 48 hours, almost 72 hours ahead of Laura, but it's moving slower, so Laura's going to catch up. But there's still about a 48-hour lag in between the two systems, so they're not going to be simultaneously in the same spot. Here's a close-up view right now as we look at Marco. Marco was showing signs of blowing up quickly. It was rapidly intensifying, but in the last couple of hours, the eye walls deteriorated a little bit, so it's not as well organized as it was, but it's still a very potent system. The circulation center is somewhere right in there, and it's small. That's kind of important because the smaller it is, it can insulate itself, and small core storms like this ramp up intensity and they drop in intensity pretty quickly. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I'm always worried about these storms rapidly intensifying when they get that small core and they're moving through the Gulf of Mexico, because that is an area that is ripe for development. So here's the 5 o'clock advisory, fresh into the computer. So the winds are 65 miles per hour, so just below hurricane strength, moving north-northwest, and that's key. It's got a northerly component, and there's been a pretty significant shift in the track with Marco moving straight up through the middle of the Gulf and getting up to 85 miles per hour. Pretty significant hurricane, maybe borderline Cat 2. Now, as it gets closer to the coast, it's going to start experiencing some wind shear, so it's likely going to weaken a little bit, but likely making landfall as a hurricane sometime Monday, and then right near the mouth of the Mississippi River. So it's going to clobber southeast Louisiana. So everyone in southeast Louisiana, you need to be getting ready for this storm right now, and likely we're going to see some evacuations for Grand Isle and some of the low-lying areas of Lower Lafourche, Jefferson, and Plaquemines Parish. I think we're going to see that happen pretty quickly. You could see it recurving, and notice where it is by Wednesday. It's off into Texas as a remnant low. So let's talk about Laura. And remember those times. I'll show you again those in a minute. So here's Laura, visible satellite image, much larger looking system, though it's kind of deceiving because the low-level circulation is somewhere over in here. The mid-level circulation's back here. They're not really aligned yet, but it's got a big complex of showers and thunderstorms around it. So it definitely looks more like a storm than Marco. So there it is. You kind of see how the center is in between, basically Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. So it's going to be pushing off to the north and west. It's likely going to have a tough time crossing the big mountains of Hispaniola, but could maintain itself because a lot of the circulation will remain over water. Then it moves into the Gulf of Mexico by early Tuesday morning, so 2 o'clock in the morning. Remember, by this time, Marco's already made landfall. So it's moving over very warm water there in the Gulf of Mexico. By 1 o'clock, it's in the middle, and then it's heading towards almost the exact same spot of Louisiana Wednesday afternoon. So notice that's a whole 48-hour difference. Now, that's not ideal, but at least they're not in the same spot at the same time. But we could have two back-to-back hurricanes make landfall in southeast Louisiana, and southeast Louisiana gets heavy rain and storm surge and doesn't have time for that water to recede, and we get another storm 48 hours later. This is bad news. Now, the concern I have about Laura is that the potential is Laura could be a much more intense hurricane. It just depends what Marco does. Does Marco upwell a bunch of water here? Does it leave behind some dry air, some sinking air ahead of it? Those are questions we just don't know, but I think there's a big enough gap that we're probably not going to see much of an issue with either of the storms. So let me put them together and kind of show you this. I think this graphic really tells you how they're going to behave together. So you can see Marco's already well into the Gulf, and in fact it makes landfall right there at 1 o'clock. So notice the difference. Laura is still right here, but Marco's making landfall. That's a pretty big spread, folks. That's likely not going to interact with each other directly, but Marco could have some kind of influence on the water here. It could cause some sinking air ahead of it, which would weaken this storm. So those are things that we just got to figure out. But the water is, bath water down there. It's near 90 degrees in some parts of the Gulf. You can see as Marco's moving inland and weakening, here comes Laura making landfall a whole 48 hours later, almost the same strength, almost in the exact same spot, and it's moving more due north up towards Memphis. So the concern here is you're going to have all this heavy rain trying to flow back out to sea. You had storm surge from one storm surge from a second storm. This is a huge, huge, huge flood threat for southeast Louisiana. It's a very flood-prone area to begin with. This is bad news, I think, for southeast Louisiana. Now, a lot of people have asked about the Fujiwhara effect. I am going to touch on this because we're probably not going to see it because the storms aren't going to get close enough, but they would rotate around a central point. In fact, I think this effect will happen maybe after landfall. The remnants could rotate around each other. By then, you know, they're just remnant lows. They do not get stronger. There's no super hurricane coming. This is not about one massive storm forming in the Gulf of Mexico. It really should be more and more about back-to-back, a double hit 48 hours apart. That's the real concern. Now, I have to update this graphic, but I'm going to show you real quick. The steering currents have not changed all that much. I haven't had a chance to move them, but you can kind of see what's driving this whole thing. This ridge is just building back to the west. So it's picking up both Marco and it's picking up Laura and pretty much putting them in the same spot. Now, there's a weakness between these two ridges. There's a big heat wave out west, which is causing the wildfires and just scorching hot. We've got the Atlantic Ridge. So there's this narrow pathway between them. That's kind of where the storms are going. So they're not lined up perfectly, but you can see where they're going towards that same spot. So that's where they're heading right now. And if you have friends or family, and if you're watching this down in southeast Louisiana, please prepare now. I'm about to update this map that we might have to be in the go stage in southeast Louisiana, but you should be in the set stage. You're inside both forecast cones. Plan for the storm and prepare to evacuate if told so. And I think we will see evacuations issued, if not today. There may be already ongoing for some of the low-lying areas there in southeast Louisiana. So again, let's go back to the tracks. I'll put them together. There you go. Look at that. Back-to-back hits on the central Gulf Coast of the United States. Of course, I'll have coverage on NBC Charlotte and WCNC.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can check me out on all of those platforms.